A Piece of the Big Picture, Volume 1 by R. Russell. No piece is wasted. Lil Rod, Chapter 1, First Solo. As far back as I can remember, church has been the background scenery of my life. At the age of 3, I approached my pastor through the crowd of adults fellowshipping around him. I finally make it to him, and I politely tap his pant leg to gain his attention. He looks down at me with a smile and asks, "Hey, Mr. Roderick, what can I do for you?" "Pastor, I have a song I want to sing." I say this without flinching. Where does a 3-year-old get the nerve, gall, and audacity? "What song are you singing?" "Victory by Helen Baylor." "Okay, Mr. Roderick, we'll see you tonight." He turns to get the other adults that are round about him. That was all I needed. Just like Charlie and Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, I sprinted all the way to my dad in the sound tech room to share the good news. I remember coming back to church that evening and everything was going like a normal communion service. At some point while I was playing with my toys in the back, until I heard my pastor call me over the microphone. I jumped up and went marching intently to the stage. I grabbed the microphone and began to clap until the crowd began to participate. Rather than start in the beginning of the song or even the chorus, I went to the vamp where Helen Baylor was spelling victory. As I continued doing this, the audience would repeat each letter after me while rising to their feet. By the end, the entire church was standing, clapping, and rocking like a pep rally. I walked off the stage into a sea of high fives. That was the day that I became addicted to the stage. Lil Rod, Chapter 2, Facebreaker. I always tell people I was talking to Jesus before I ever knew that it was kind of weird. That's just to make light of my uniqueness as a kid. I grew up in a full gospel church that believed in the power of Pentecost. The services were expressive to include and not limit speaking in tongues, running, jumping, dancing, and prophesying. By the time I made it to the 6th grade, I had done all the above and more. On the other hand, I hated school, and though I was intelligent, my attention span couldn't take repetition on concepts that I have mastered in application. More times than not, I was put out of class or sent to the office. My parents got called to the school, so I knew I was on punishment, which was a constant growing up. Unlike other children growing up, the things I enjoyed doing were all at church. So the biggest punishment for me growing up is not being able to participate in church. On this Sunday, being that I got in trouble, I should know not to ever endeavor to smile like I'm enjoying anything at church. People who know me know that praise break music is like a drug to me. If you play it around me, expect my feet to find themselves moving to the beat. At some point in time, I hear it and my feet respond viscerally. Before I knew it, I made it down the aisle across the front. I got caught up, so I got to get back to my seat when I feel a heavy hand tapping me on the shoulder. It was one of the ministers on the front row that did security. He then points behind me. I turn around to have my mother in clergy attire standing at the edge of the stage, pointing her finger in my face. Now mind you, the entire church is watching. Just as my mother's scolding ends, the music stops, and I walk to my seat in pure silence. As if the scene in the sanctuary wasn't enough, I walked out to the parking lot to see the entire team that I serve with in the dance ministry. They were having a complete spoof roast session on what happened inside. In an effort to be a good sport, I joined the hurdle that has become a growing circle. Unable to stifle their laughter, they began to hush one another with red-colored tear-stained faces, and some of the group scattered at my arrival. Before I could utter a word, the awkward silence that was the theme music of my mother's entrance. Needless to say, The subsequent events have been described many times by black comedians, okay? Feel free to insert any black comedian's bit on discipline in the family here. Lil Rod, Chapter 3, Second Solo. It's been over 10 years since the first solo, and I am now serving as a volunteer in children's church. In assisting in children's church, it also required that I assisted with the children's choir. I had no problem being the section leader of the tenor section in the children's choir. As a matter of fact, it's a pleasure. I didn't know that throughout the month of rehearsing, the choir director had planned for me to sing lead on this song. I get told this at the next to last rehearsal before the big concert at the city's convention center. I immediately shake my head no while she's talking. She very nonchalantly insists that I could and would, hugged me, and left me stuck on stupid. The week leading up to that Saturday was slow torture. I could not find a version of this song with a lead. This was before YouTube and streaming platforms, so I had CDs, LimeWire, and BearShare. When those resources rendered no aid, I was up a creek without a paddle. The day of the event has come. I'm dressed in uniform on the stage for sound check before it all starts. My stomach hurts, sweating, and all in my head concerning the fact that I have no point of reference for leading this song at all. Being tapped to grab the microphone wasn't enough to break me out at this moment, so I grabbed the microphone and stood silently, statuesque throughout the choir's run-through of the song. You heard right. I didn't add a single note. With frustration on his face, the youth pastor pulls me off the stage to give me a pep talk that sounded a lot like Charlie Brown's teacher. I could not wait to have a seat. The moment of truth has finally come, and my pastor calls the children's choir to the stage. The distance to the stage feels like miles, but I eventually make it to the destination. I'm on the stage, and there are people I love looking at me in the crowd, so it's not that bad. The song starts, and throughout its duration, I made several attempts at ad-libbing. Though they were attempts, my lack of confidence betrayed me. Feeling defeated, I walked backstage alone to be stopped by my youth pastor. He wasted no time giving me a verbal beatdown that it took years from which to recover. There were words like unprepared and half-singing. He closed his discourse with this statement: "I would have rather you say nothing than do what you did." That experience taught me so much. I never got up unprepared again, but it was about 5 years before I dared even thinking about leading a song again. Rashad, Chapter 4, Where Do I Fit? Up until my 9th year, I had been able to count my black classmates on one hand, minus fingers, until I changed schools. My mom and dad thought it would be a better opportunity for me if I went to my dad's alma mater. I go to orientation, and it's a few more black people than I'm used to. Nonetheless, it was all good. On the first day of school, it was an extreme culture shock. There were 2 classes of people that didn't exist in my schools prior: hood and privileged. According to the hood people, I was privileged because I had both parents and lived in a house. On the flip side, the privileged looked down on me because my name brand clothing came from outlets, and I also didn't know about higher end brands that were not in the local mall. My experience during the first roll call had me ready to drop out of school. My first class is home economics. Even though the bell has rung, the teacher raises her voice to quiet the room. She commences roll call. She finally says my name. After I reply with "here," my neighbor said, "Fruity booty ass boy," and the roll continues. Now once the roll is done, my other neighbor shouts, "Fruit juice booty ass boy." My teacher demands silence, and it ensues until the same person says, "I like penis." The whole class erupts in laughter. At this point, my teacher moves me as if I was the one with the outburst. I cooperate nonetheless. The bell rings and I'm held after class is over. My teacher explains that the students who were around me when the incident happened were leaders of the football team. Therefore, they wouldn't get in any real trouble if they were sent to the office. So she instructed me that it would be much better to be seen and not heard. I was taken back, but I left the class inwardly wounded and defenseless. Rashad, Chapter 5, Trying Out for Cheerleading. In the spring of my freshman year, I heard about cheerleading tryouts during the announcements. By the end of the announcements, I was knocking on the door of the cheerleader sponsors. I quickly filled out the form, only to find out that I needed a parent's signature. That immediately killed my excitement. Just the thought of having to involve my parents at all brought anxiety. After having extended conversations with both parents, it was crystal clear that neither one of them thought it was a good idea. However, my dad signed the form as my mother walked out of the room, verbally expressing her distaste for my decision. I wasn't moved much by this because this is just how things were. The next day after school, I was in the gym dressed and ready for cheer camp to start. I'm confident and motivated because I spent the night studying the movies Bring It On and You Got Served. About this time, the current team comes into the gym, pulls out mats, and starts effortlessly tumbling on the mats. I noticed that there are only 3 to 5 of us trying out that could not tumble, and that there were only 2 slots on the team. I already assumed I wouldn't make the team, but I stayed because I didn't want to show my hand. My confidence had packed up and left me, but I still tried. I started to gain my confidence back as we began to learn the choreography, and I noticed the girls were struggling. That gave me a few chuckles, watching these rhythmically challenged white girls frustrate the choreographer while I'm being praised and used as an example. I took it all in. The day of the tryouts, I wake up with nervousness all over me. I wake up my mom because she's my ride. I reassure myself by practicing the routine several times while getting ready to go, and this brings me some peace, even if it doesn't completely settle me. I'm now as ready as I'm gonna be, so I sit and I wait on my mother because I can hear her in the bathroom. She finally comes out in her pajamas, and I head straight to the car. When my mother starts the car, I immediately see that the current time is the time of my tryouts. I am livid because I woke my mom when I woke, and I waited 20 minutes on her after I was ready. I didn't understand at all. I ride in complete silence, fighting tears. Once I got to the school, I sat next to the door of the audition and watched in tears. Rashad, Chapter 6, The Turnaround. My sophomore year, the antagonizing behavior of fellow students had reached a peak, and even the girls were calling me out of my name. It was now normal. Once again, during announcements, I heard that the drama club is doing Tyler Perry's Medea's family reunion, and they are having auditions today. Before the announcements could end, I was knocking on the drama teacher's door. I let her know I wanted to audition, and she responded with one word: sing. I closed my eyes, and I began to sing the song that the children's choir director would always sing as a solo. I love you, Lord. I started off giving my best impression of her, and as I continued, I began to feel the lyrics come alive in me. This changed how I sang it. By the time I got to the end, the drama teacher was singing along with her hands lifted like she was in church. We stood in silence for a few moments before she announced that I got the role and rehearsal starts tomorrow. And if you know anything about me, you know I am a major Tyler Perry fan, so I was beyond moved by the news. As a result, I ran to the bathroom and cried. When I got home, I pulled out my bootleg Tyler Perry DVDs and began to intently study my reference materials so I would be prepared for rehearsal. I could barely sleep because I was so ecstatic. During the rehearsals, I began to build relationships with the cast, which led to friendships. By show day, I had inside jokes with the cast and crew, a level of camaraderie I had not experienced up until this point. The drama nerds were actually cool. On the day of the show, I remember that I have a solo, and not just any solo. The highest male vocal solo in the play was that the professional actor who was hired by Tyler Perry had trouble with it in rehearsals. I immediately began to remember the last time I led a song and the calamity that ensued as a result. Before anxiety could take over, my scene partner grabbed my hand and asked if I wanted to pray. I shook my head yes, and he prayed and prayed hard. It was so consoling to know that my partner had my back, which was new to me. Showtime comes, and I walk out on stage bold as a lion. I make all my cues, deliver my lines, and execute my fight stunt flawlessly. The entire school goes up in an uproar like I had scored the winning touchdown at the Super Bowl. Needless to say, the show was amazing. And that same day, the entire school changed how they were treating and perceiving me as a result. Synopsis. Do you know your purpose? If not, to have taken a look at the pieces of your past to see if anything is there. It may seem like an impossible puzzle. However, trust that if you take the time to start putting those pieces together, surely the picture will become clearer piece by piece. The author has invited you on a journey as he does just that. This short, easy read is to stir thought-provoking conversation and introspective questions. Also, it's a quick way to meet your annual book reading quota. If you haven't read a book all year, this is one you can definitely complete. Thank you.